Hi there. No one's here yet. I don't expect people to be here, so welcome to the live stream. This is the second of the Friday live streams. I was not feeling that great today. I probably wasn't going to even do this. I earlier wanted to do some taping for my thing, but today was a complete disaster for many reasons. So just I had, and so thank you for being here. Those of you who are here, I got to see one person disappeared. Oops, one person came on, one person left. Oops. The theme today is, we're going to go said there. I said a couple things. I said in my little card today. I did say in my card, but apparently what's going on with the Reading Montesquieu uploads, what am I working on, and things that emerge from this, right? This is the Judy booty of what we're doing, okay? One, what's going on with the Montesquieu uploads? Well, like I said, I'm posting each book. I'm doing a book, a video. One book of The Spirit of the Laws, a video. Here's one of my older editions, ugly blue, old dying blue copy from the original 1987? When was this? It was 1987, 88, right? No, 89. It was published in 89, exactly. So just during the 1990s, this came out in the 1990s. So, now it's like 3 different editions. With snazzier, nicer covers, blue covers. No, this is nice and old. What I'm doing here is going through a book. We just so far uploaded. I uploaded last time. I did finish up to book 8. I think we're a little ahead. That therefore finishes part 1. The structure of the Spirit of Laws is like this. It's one of those things that drives people crazy about Montesquieu. That it doesn't really have a nice simple structure. It's a very complex structure, and often led people to believe that there's no structure at all. There's just this random thoughts about government here and there, and that there's kind of a debate in the tradition. Now, starting with the 19th century writers, 19th century thinkers about the late, mid 20s, 1815, 1820, 1830s, all post Rousseau, interested by Rousseau and Kant and a little bit of Hegel, all came to hold a position that there is no logical system in there's no real ordering logic in the. Yes, there's certain ideas, and therefore there is this kind of a shotgun of ideas. Now, this wasn't held at the time of this, and in fact, this is the question of the great plan of Montesquieu. And I'm going to suggest that if you look at it by parts and pay attention, he plays with you. He plays with you. Part 1 will have 8 books, even numbers. There's no center in that sense. There's a center. If there is a center, it's going to focus on this, but this is the groundwork he does in there for that. So this is the groundwork on constitutions and government, the principles of government, different types of constitutions, the structures and things about this. His famous 3 types of governments, 3 that become 5, because republics, difference between democratic governments or republics and aristocratic republics, and therefore that is always the kind of flux of Montesquieu. He echoes, he takes Machiavelli's, typology presented the prince between republic and principalities, and he adds in despotisms, right? So it's republics, monarchies, and despotisms. But here, what happens is more interesting is that in many ways, he makes an argument at the end of book 8 about the size issue about these things, and that therefore the larger the size of a regime, and the more despotic it will be in that sense. that republics are small or need to be small, or at least it needs to be small enough that the people are able to see each other and know each other and have limits to this. In fact, the size, in fact, the monarchies can't be small because monarchies need systems of honor. Therefore, monarchies must be moderate, must have a moderate size, must be bigger than that. In fact, if it goes too big with monarchies, it starts factionalizing and dividing up. So, so the first part is basically the foundation in Montesquieu of what's going on in the crux of well, what's going on the crux of this his presentation of democratic, I'm making democratic, but the political system of the state, of the political order, the different forms of the different types of government, different forms, and the consequences. There's principles, there are things that motivate them, the things that define them, the things that shape them. It goes right through it. Now, this is then part two. We get, and therefore, like we said, the first part is 8 books. Part two goes from book 9 through book 13, and this where we have a thing of 5 books. This is where we have 5. In the middle book, book 11, is the thing on political liberty, on the laws of political liberty that relation to constitutions. In other words, the first 2 books before it, 9 and 10, deals with defense, basically the laws of defense of the laws in relation to defensive force and offensive war, and the laws of war, the rights of nations, right? And then what comes after it is a continuation of 12 is on the question of political liberty to the citizens. In other words, how more like the civil liberty aspects of this. And 13 deals with the question of taxes, right? But the middle chapter of part 2, 11, is the interesting one, and that's actually interesting because what is it? It's 11. Is it book 11 is the famous one because we know that it has book 11 has 20 chapters, and in 11, particularly at I think it's chapter 6, right? 6 is the big one. Chapter 6, we get not think that the famous chapter on the Constitution of England, which everyone seems to argue that it's about division of powers, but it's really about what the argument is that where is liberty to be found? The regime, that constitution that promotes liberty. That's the chapter before it, and therefore the argument of political liberty ends the 5th chapter, and chapter 6 begins the chapter book 11 of the Spirit Laws of the Constitution, the question of the Constitution of England. And then what we get is a discussion of separation of powers, right? But it's not about this is where I disagree with my friend, someone like David Starkey, who's very critical of Montesquieu. I think he takes he's not. I think not. He doesn't understand the French style. The French doesn't always think directly. This is a very indirect book. Montesquieu does not always come. Sometimes he'll say something directly. He sometimes comes across very aggressive, asserting, but then he will use mockery. He will say something in praising, but then mocking it. And I think in this case, what happens here is his discussion of separation of powers, which I think he thinks is very important because he follows the Roman tradition that the Romans are the father of we attribute to Montesquieu separation of powers, but he is basically repeating what the ancient Romans taught, particularly the Roman Republic taught about power, that you had to divide power, right? This is the whole thing. This is the great insight of the Roman Republican era, period, era, not error, but R as a mistake, but era as an age, right? This Republican age of Rome had a fear of power, and that therefore they had the fear of the Rex, the king, and thus they divided political power. Therefore, this is why the consuls, which were going to be elected the way they did, in other words, they were always to be part of never plebeians. There was never going to be this plebiscite democracy. Rather, what happened was the Senate would nominate, and the people would could get a veto if they didn't like it. They'd be a veto in the sense that it would be a majority veto. If the majority of people didn't like them, then he wouldn't be accepted. Therefore, they got to vote. They got to say, the people did, the plebs, right? But they didn't get to decide. That was the Roman aristocratic model in that sense. It was a Republican aristocratic model in that sense. But they were fearful of power because they rebelled against the king. So therefore, therefore, the whole discussion of this goes to this. And the big insight about England is their jury, right? That's the whole point. It's not. He speaks of judges, but he means jury. The jury and the way that the jury decides. Remember, the jury is the ultimate decider of guilt or who wins the dispute. The judge is only the enforcer. He's a magistrate who enforces. He may rule on law. He might rule on the specific application, but he's bound by what the law says. He's not an ad hoc. He is not deciding what the decision is unless the parties agree to this to some limited extent in minor cases. Okay, or to deal with matters of fact. Like when the application of you go for English common law judge or a judge in an English common law system, and you want a writ, right? A specific writ of action, which is almost like a statutory entity that the government creates. The crown created a list of writs that became tied to the state. As the common law system, they became permanent norms of these legal commands that the court could go to a court agent to ask to deliver, to execute. So this was what was the writ system. The writs are aspects of commands. Okay, and a judge can issue a writ, but this is not a decision. The judge's decisions are not they're not arbitrary in that sense. They can't be arbitrary. The common law system does not allow for arbitrary decision. That the decision must be stare decisis. That is, this must fit with the precedents and rulings of the previous decisions of the court in that jurisdiction. So therefore, there is ideas of jurisdictional concern. There's one jurisdiction, uniform jurisdiction of the law. But in America, each colony had its own separate jurisdiction, and therefore this created a kind of a kind of the beginning of federalism in the sense, legal federalism, that there's different judicial districts. And in different judicial districts, authority and precedent works for those districts only until the higher regional court or the state higher courts do it. Then there's uniformity. In other words, once a ruling is made at the highest level of the courts, at the Supreme Courts or the state Supreme Courts, then all courts underneath must follow. Otherwise, rulings and precedents are jurisdictional about the level of the court that it occurred with. And judges within that jurisdiction are bound to obey and comply with the jurisdiction. This is completely different than common law, Roman law or civil law models, where every decision, judges are not bound by written decisions. Rather, judges deal with the case and the facts and deal justice. And therefore, it is very much the arbitrary decision. And this is the point that Montesquieu makes here. I'm getting ahead of myself in Montesquieu. But therefore, it's very interesting. The middle chapter of part 2 focuses on the question of what is liberty, right? Liberty, the foundation of liberty, right? So that's why it's interesting. Now, in part 3, we get 6 chapters, 14 through 9, books, not chapters. I've been saying chapters a lot. I don't mean that. Books 14 through 19 as part 3, which, very interesting, discuss climate. He does climate and wars. He begins with climate, then talks about slavery, 14 climate, right? Then the connection between civil slavery, domestic slavery, and political slavery in the next 15, 16, and 17 books, and the relationship to climate. And then on 18, the terrain, in other words, the laws in relation to the terrain, the physical terrain, geography. And then last, 19, he deals with the principles of, in other words, the laws in relation to principle forming the general spirit, mores, and the manners of a nation. Right? So we start with the impact of climate, then the impact of territory, then the emergence of mores and habits and the spirit of a nation, right? And that's very interesting. That therefore the middle part 3, which is it's kind of the middle 6 parts, right? But it's not. This is. But here we get the discussion of climate and which shapes biology. Then the question of how it shapes slavery because of climate, and then the question of terrain, the physical geography, and how that shapes the political system and different natures of political states. And then last but not least, his discussion of mores and of habits and general spirit of what forms a nation, which again is a product of all those factors that he just did. Now, part 4, this is an important one. This is books 20 through 24, 5 books. It's commerce. And this is the point. So therefore, if we look at this from the point of view of the structure, this is a very interesting thing. Commerce is the whole heart of the book. But what's so interesting here is, it is the ordering of the books, because it's about commerce, but then the middle book, the middle chapter of this part 22 is on the relation of the use of money, right? Money, monetary, which is interesting. But then the next chapter of that is inhabitants, right? The laws about inhabitants. It doesn't make sense. Well, everything else is about commerce, right? Right then, money in the middle, and then what happens? It goes from the size of the inhabitants, which means, and actually it is economy, because he says that people, if you have too few people, then you need to be, a nation needs to be very innovative, hardworking, and if not, then the nation will collapse or not work. And if it's too big, it actually produces a surplus, and therefore labor costs will be very low, and therefore they won't be innovative. In other words, it's that sweet spot of innovation and industry is always going to be a sweet spot between too few, insufficient population, an insufficient population, and a excess population. Excess populations tend to not be either hardworking or innovative, and this is going to be an interesting point about this. And this is what is, and actually he even says, what about China? And he says, well, China is only hardworking because there's a whip always applied. In other words, the spotted character of the Chinese government and the fact that they need to work, their large population and the lack of food. In other words, unlike Africa has lots of food. So therefore, the large populations can be lazy. It's easy to get food. And in China, the women are, he says, the women are fertile, the culture is fertile, but the food is lacking. And therefore, because they have to really, if they don't work hard, there will be famine and death everywhere. So therefore, this is a very interesting point he makes about that, and explains the question of that. Therefore, people will point to China saying, "Oh, that's a big population, hard work. Maybe you're wrong about the size of the population." He goes, no. That's because there's a specific circumstance for that. And that's another aspect of Montesquieu's kind of style here, how he will point to, okay, this general statement produces this behavior, but then what happens is that, okay, what is about this exception? And then he shows how the exception really proves is in conformity to his principles. So that's a very interesting thing about part 4, the commerce. And then part 5 is small. It is 2 books, right? This is the famous books about the laws in relation to each country's external police. That's 25, the laws in relation to external police of the country, right? And then 26 is the laws and relations they should have with order of things in which they can enact. So this is a very strange part about what is the external police, about the question of religion or the establishment of religion. And I think in many ways 26 echoes that aspect. So it's religion is the chapter, these 2 chapters, 2 on religion. Notice commerce gets 5, religion gets 2. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that population is dealt with right after he deals with the central point of money, right? And then last but not least, part 6, again, which is 5 chapters, is very odd because the first chapter is the first book, 27, is a book about the Roman institutions, but it's only one chapter, and it's very much kind of an executive summary of his book on the considerations of Rome. So therefore, that's kind of a weird thing. And then then what happens is 28 is about the French civil origins, the origins and revolutions of civil law among the French. Right? We explain why the laws changed over time, the sources of the laws and the sources of the institutions of the French. So the Romans to French, and then what he does, 29, which is the middle book of the thing, on the ways to compose laws, the general theory of composing laws, which, whoa. What's before here is this very historical chapter, this kind of summaries of historical events and historical things. In the middle of, and what comes after it is 2 chapters. The theory of feudal laws among the Franks in relation to establishment of monarchy, right? So therefore the monarchy, again, how it established the monarchy, and 31 ends on the theory of feudal laws among the Franks and the ways that causes the revolution or changes in their monarchy, right? So therefore, we in the middle chapter really seems to be out of place. It's like, why is it there? Maybe this should be a lot earlier in the beginning of the book. Why does he put it in the middle of something which seems to be? Remember, this is what's so depressing about how the book ends, is that it ends kind of on this series of histories and the instructions of the French, focusing mostly on the French. Okay, this is very, in other words, the book 6 starts with Roman because the Roman origins of France, and this is really the French-centric part. But then in the middle of it, we get this general discussion of how to compose their laws. So therefore, if we see the overall pattern here in Montesquieu, it's kind of odd and it's fun to see. So that's what I hope you will take with me as we go through the Montesquieu things in the next coming months as we go through the Montesquieu. Again, why am I sticking to the schedule? Because I'm a little bit exhausted, but this allows me to slow down some a little bit. And these chapters can be longer. The books, I'm doing a book, so therefore sometimes there can be, they're 45 minutes, 30 minutes. If I'm lucky, it's a short book, but sometimes the book is like 2 of these, but over an hour and a half, right? So it's like, oh God, it's a big, complicated book. And there's going to be one book that's the longest book. I'm worried about that one. That might be actually a 2-hour video. And I know people don't like those kind of videos, but this is how we go through this, the idea, principle, book, to go through it. Doing this a video by chapter, the chapters are so short, and then randomly trying to even this would actually cause a kind of pain in the ass. Okay, so what other thing I was going to talk about, I said today. So I talked about the nature of the trajectory of how I'm doing what I'm doing with that. What I'm up to. Okay, I said I was going to be up to writing. I just got a piece accepted and published in a Polish political science journal, which is something. I have comments back from a friend who looked at one of my papers, and I have to submit its book. This is the discussion of the middle people, or is it the middle people, or the middling class? Okay, this is book. I'm looking at chapter 11 of book 4 of Aristotle's Politics, and I'm looking at the question of the mesos and the question of the middling sort. Is this about the middle? Is this really about the middle class regime, as everyone asserts, or the rise of this, or is it something different? And I have to work on the paper a little bit. I get the paper back with comments. I have to go clean it up. I want to get. I would like to get it published in a good journal so I can get more points. Points. That's the weird of academic life in Europe. You need the points so you can, get things. I am putting together my paper, the written paper, of what I presented. As you saw the video of my presentation of a conference that happened in Warsaw a week or so ago, on the was it 10th, 11th of May. I talked about it some in a video, both a live stream, and also I posted the video, the rather odd recording. My wife did the recording because the conference organizers didn't bother to record the event, unfortunately, and she had problems with her cell phone recording. It kind of stopped, and she made several recordings, and therefore there's little teeny second gaps between them that she had to put them together. I think she did a fair job. It's at least better than nothing, right? I did a live stream talk about it afterwards to kind of make, present my kind of after conference thoughts about the thing. And that's what I think next thing I have to work on. I need to get that done for publication in their book they want to put together. And I have to work on a couple other things. I'm working on my Aristotle's Best Regime book, Aristotle's Regime Science book, which will be my book I want to get done by next year. I want to get it written, finalized. I have over half the book written. I have 400 something pages of it in manuscript so far. I have mostly book 4 done. I am right now finishing book 5 of the politics, but books 4, 5, and 6 of the politics. Book 6, I'm going to have a little. I think I will once I finish book 4, particularly a discussion of the paper I gave at the Chicago event at the Midwest on the regime as variable and regime change. I need to just fix up some stuff on that, and that will be basically done. I need to then do the thing. I should write the thing on preservation and how to preserving regimes that he recommends is these two chapters in book 4 or book 5. Sorry, book 5. What's it? 6 was it book 5? Was it, yeah, it's book 5. It's 4, 5, 6, and 7 is the aristocracy regime discussion about the variations. So 5, 6, and 7. Then 8 and 9 are preservation, and then we get to 10 and 11, which is about preservation, change, and monarchy. And then chapter 12, which is about longevity and the cycles of change. Each one of those are going to have. I'm going to make a separate paper. So the one about monarchies, change and preservation, I call that Aristotle's political science, and this is going to be a big paper. I have over 20 pages of notes on it already, and it's something I've been working on for a couple of years now. But I have to write it out, and that's going to be I think that's going to be my summer project in a sense. Then I have to do book 6, which in book 6 is going to be, it's all about instituting regimes, and that's what my research work is. So that's explaining to you what I'm doing in that sense. Why am I doing what I'm doing? So that's the research of what I'm doing as a scholar and as a worker. I'm here. I'm going to be finishing the Montesquieu. In that sense, we do the Montesquieu. I will then hope to do a new version of. I might do a new Prince, a redoing of the Prince one, simply because I didn't do it the way I did it first time. I just didn't have the text there like I do having now, and now I have a copy of the text for the system. I can use it. I discovered I can upload stuff. And I had it. I always had it. I didn't realize I use Screencasty as my kind of texting device to making videos. It's a pain in the ass, and it's getting more expensive. And it crashed. We had a crash a couple of days ago on it, and this explains why one of the videos, the picture will disappear. The text will be there, but my image will disappear because I had to stop it for a second to deal with the problem, and then when I turned it on, there was a text problem. I was scooping between texts, and then the image just popped up and then didn't pop back on. And oops. But I decided I was already an hour into the thing, and it was very frustrating. So I just did it. I hope people won't get mad. So not seeing hearing my voice, but not seeing my ugly face. Okay, I understand. So that is the structure of what we're doing and how we're doing it. Now the next thing, let's what comes up of things. This is what I said. The Friday stream. What am I doing? Okay, one of the things I do, the princess thing, but one of the things I've been thinking about doing is doing Kozhev's this little book on his notion of authority. And I think this is a very interesting book on this question because it's been hitting on me. When I first saw it in 2014, when I actually read the French in 2000. Was it? It was the French edition came out in 2010, 2011. I remember reading the French. 2004, sorry. The German came out in 2004. I found it in 2007, 2008. And this edition came out in 2000. Verso published a hardback, and I have the hardback. I have the hardback writings in it down here. It's right down here. This is one of the, I got when I saw this when I right down here with my with this. There's the hardback. It was nice. It was pretty. It was not that expensive back when it came out, and therefore I got copies of it for some friends and things I knew. But then the paperback came out in 2020. This is very affordable. Why is this interesting? It's a very general analysis of authority, with the different types of authority. He creates his own typology of the kinds of different varieties of authority. Now, why is this interesting? Because we know Kozhev is Schmidt after the war comes very Kozhev. Okay, he's in France. He wrote this during World War II. He wrote this for the Vichy government. This is kind of a plan, a discussion memo. It's a memo, really, a brief presentation. Again, like the Prince. It's like we could say maybe this is Kozhev's Prince in that sense. It's written for the minister of the Vichy government about the question of legitimization of authority, what matters. And it's amazing how this book is in a sense. This is why it's a brief. And Kozhev is not known for being brief. There's other writings that we have. It's just one of these monsters. You know, that's one of the reasons I don't like. I would never teach a Kozhev book because, or even do a series on Kozhev, one of the Kozhev books, because there's no. It's this endless text. You'd have to if you did a part of the text, it'd be like 2-hour, 3-hour video. It would destroy. You'd have to introduce arbitrary stops, just so you don't go to a 2-hour video, 3-hour video if you were trying to read it. And he's difficult even in French. Okay, the kind of complexity of thought. Most translations just of him, you know, the early translation of him at Cornell published about the commentary on the spirit, phenomenology of the spirit, are just painfully difficult, even if accurate. I know how another friend they did the commentary on the philosophy of right in the early 2000s and like this. It's a very difficult books to do, and yes, Kozhev is the father of neoliberalism. He's a Stalinist, but he prefers Stalin to be the boy in charge. But this is the kind of character of the neoliberal, the European model that he helped create. Remember, he was part of the team for not only the team of France helping with the creation of the EU. He was also very much instrumental on GATT, which became the founding organization, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which became the foundation base for the World Trade Organization, right? The so-called Washington Consensus. And therefore, it's very funny. When we think about the world trade and world things, we think neoliberals, and we think, oh, this is kind of like, must be Hayekian or must be something tied to kind of markets, right, economics. No, it was kind of Kozhevian. Yes, there were some liberal economists involved, but in many ways, the French, the way how he shaped it and how he thought it, and institutionally, the administrative constructions of it, Kozhev plays a very role. Now, but this is like this idea of authority and the 4 types of authority that he leaps on. and then their subvariations of are very interesting in that sense. And it creates this typology of authority, which, okay, I think is very useful. And in fact, one could argue that it's kind of Kojève's commentary, running commentary on someone like Weber. Weber is another person I eventually would like to talk about some more. I think is understudied. I think Weber is a very good writer. The problem with getting good editions of his work, one of the editions I was found, I saw this edition, very expensive. It's Palmgrave. It's a very good translation in the sense that the translators are really trying to help be faithful to the German text and trying to make it so that readers can follow it. It's what is so great about this edition would be the notes and comments that everything he does. They do. The husband and wife team, Tony Waters and Dagmar Waters, did a very outstanding job, particularly when they do a chapter like the chapter on each before the thing, he'll have notes on the translation, right? And then he has and when he does the vocation as politics, the introduction has this wonderful outline of the structure of it. Right? It gives the outline of it in there, so it's a wonderful addition. The problem is getting a good copy of this on Google Books, okay? So I can use it for the thing. Therefore, this is why this is the famous things. He has the half the book is commentary about it. Chapter 1, 2, and 3 are commentary by Walters about Weber's thing, but chapter 4, 5, and 6, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are texts, new translations of text. Mostly the books, bureaucracy, discipline, charisma, and these are from the power description of power within Gemeinschaft, classes, Stand, or caste and parties by Weber. Okay, this is part of his the position of powers within the Gemeinschaft, right? Within this community, class, standee, which we would call caste, right, and parties. And then what happens is discipline and charisma, his chapter on discipline and charisma. Then famous bureaucracy chapter, Weber's thing on bureaucracy. And then the famous politics as vocation lecture, which was given at Munich. So, I mean, this is one of the things, and these are great books. The other book is Economy and Society, the new translation by Keith. I want to say Keith. He's a scholar in Europe now. He's not really, but Howard University Press published it. It's a very good edition. You can always find the Economy and Society in the 2-volume University of California edition from the 60s, which are mediocre translations and often that miss the Nietzschean and undertones that are found in these things. So therefore, that's one of the things that I eventually would like to do, is a little bit of Weber. But again, I have a rule that people say something, hey, why don't you do something? I might do something in the small ones because of Schmidt is hard, because I like to do the concept of the political, but if I do the concept of, I know the Schmidt thing I did got a lot of views. So, okay, I understand why. I think I want to do concept of the political, and I will do. I have the material already for concept of the political. I even had the appropriate things like thumbs for it and the text ready up on the system, and I could do it, but I'm just a little worried. I like to finish Montesquieu first before I do that. That might be a break I do before I do something else in that sense. This summer, I hope to be doing a course for I'll be teaching in America online for my American school that I occasionally work for, international law. It'll be a course, and I'll be doing international law in 2 courses, in fact. A tutorial, one tutorial on statesmanship, a tutorial on diplomatic history of diplomacy. That's basically statecraft, this idea of statecraft in that sense. And the other course I'll do my international law. the Foundations of International Law course that I do for them every other, once a year, twice a year. And I'm, this is, I've been doing it since 2004 with them. So, since 2004 with them. So it's not something I'm a new kid doing. Sorry for the disruption, but my throat said I needed water or else. I can see my jacket is a little cold. It's raining outside, so I had to put a jacket on to my office. Those are the topics of this. Since no one is saying anything, and we're in 40 minutes, I'd like to do some talks of things that happened this week. The big thing I've been watching is I've been watching things. So I watch things. The Ukraine war, I'm not going to talk about. I have my own opinions about this, and I have knowledge of these things, and I interact with aspects, and I'm involved with various groups who are working with you. I live in Poland, so I work with various groups and consult. Many of my students are in military or security services, so or in government in that sense. And I have friends in the Polish government, things. So I actually understand these things, and my own theory about what's happening in Ukraine is much more complicated, in the sense that I think it is civil society. In other words, this is not this idea that there's a neoliberal coup. No, I taught many of the students involved in the Maiden thing. I've been teaching at a school in Poland, also. We're whores. I need extra money. And a decade ago, I used to teach, not only at Warsaw University, I just taught at a school called Warszawskiego. And I was teaching 3 or 4 courses a semester there. Not 3, 4, sorry, 2, 3 courses sometimes. 2 courses a term, sometimes 3 if there was something a bit big. But usually for, so extra money. It was not great money, and it was their cooperation with Coventry. Where's Wales, and then later the University of Coventry. And I think they're going to, and they're offering this British degree. So the Ukrainian students who couldn't afford to go into England, come to Poland, go to Lazarski, get an English degree at the end of the day. Many of these went back. Many of the students, the Ukrainians, tended to go back. It was the ethnic Russian or not, the Tartar-esque ones who did not go back, not because they feared Ukrainian nationalism. And I know that I've been teaching them since 2004. So this is even before the Orange Revolution. They were the Orange Revolution, things like that, made many of the students that I taught that went back, and even some of the Russian students that went back, were very much activists in the Maiden. They wanted to be part of. Many of them did want to be part of Europe. They did not want to be part of Russia. Most of the ethnic, we have to remember, Yankashenko won the election, the first election that he won against the Reform Orange team, was by promise, because the Orange people weren't that effective getting Ukraine into European things. And therefore, Yankashenko promised them to get into Europe, okay? And it was his betrayal of that promise by ripping up the agreement and then making a pact with Putin was what led to the 2014. It was not Vicky Nolan. I know Victoria Nolan from my days when I worked in Washington during the Reagan years. And she was she was this self-important little cracker, but is she this Machiavellian mastermind puppet? No, she's just a self-promoting, aggrandizing academic married to another academic, a failed academic. His father was great. This is a case. The fathers were great. The sons were mediocres. And that goes for the Crystals as well. The Crystals, both parents of Bill Crystal are geniuses. His father was less. His mother was the better scholar, historian, got the degree. Father didn't finish the degree ultimately. He was much more popular writer, public intellectual, but he was much smarter than son. Son was mediocre. So this is the Podorites as well. The Podorites, okay, I was less favorable to Podor. Norman was okay. He was good literature stuff. His politics was a little, He was just a New Deal liberal in that sense. The neocons are much more complicated creatures than people want to talk them up to be. Um, 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 so Vicky, I knew her from friends in Washington and things like that. And yes, all of a sudden she's Miss Superstar, because what happens? She was a woman and she was kind of part of the intelligence thing, and therefore this is the way the Democrats promoted her so that they could appease some of the Republicans. It was to appease the Senate Republicans. That's why the Obama people promoted her, and it was and she's just a self-promoting creature. It's not like she's a minute. I mean, my God, that she was using a cell phone. I mean, anyone with any minor limited knowledge of security knows you don't fucking discuss those kind of things on a cell phone because someone's going to hear you. My God, this is 101 tradecraft, okay? And is she supposed to be this wise CIA or State Department person who knows this kind of? This is just clown show, okay? So nothing she said was serious in that sense, and that you cannot take seriously those this oh the Russian fuck. Oh, that's just a bunch of mid-level, low-level people, and their self-importance talking about things. That's what's wrong with the State Department. The State Department is filled with a whole bunch of mediocre academics who are mostly stupid idiots who are, as Nassam would call them, IYIs, intellectual but idiots. Now I got a question up here. Do you think Putin will be forced out of Russia if Russia doesn't stop making substantial gains in Ukraine? That's a hard question. I don't know. I mean that's you can never count on the Russian people to really overthrow. Now, I think you have to remember there's an upcoming election in Russia soon. I think it's the next year or something. And Putin has to go in front of this. And that it's not the question of being ousted. It's that in other words, I don't think he's going to make any gains. I thought this whole idea was outright, no. Okay, I'm getting in trouble. I'll talk about Ukraine. In a prediction at the beginning of the war, I didn't think he'd do it. I didn't think he'd go in there. It was completely like not, his style is threatening and getting the best deal he can. And now of course he grabbed it. I think he grabbed it thinking that he can get away with 2014 again. Okay. In 2014, the Obama administration was a feminine, weak. You had Hillary Clinton running State Department, and they just did the reset button. Right? Let's do the reset button or overcharge button, right? That moment, and that he grabbed Crimea because he needed it. He couldn't live without Sebastopol. He needed Sebastopol, but the problem was once he had Sebastopol. He fomented crisis in Luhansk and Donetsk in a way he's done everywhere. In Istria, in two places, and every one of the outside areas, he's created a Russian pocket where the mafia and the things run rampant. And therefore, it becomes these become the places where the elites can hide their money from Russian people in the Russian courts, right? They become crime zones in that sense. This is how they keep control and pressure on governments to stay within it. They keep Russian soldiers there in armies, Eritrea and Moldova, and there's two breakaway places in Georgia. This is the way they can keep Russian soldiers there and aiming guns at them, saying, "You play ball, we'll kill you." But that only works if your force is believable. And I think the desperation of the 2014 was the success of it. This led to the belief that he was successful. Now, of course, he was relying on Wagner and the mercenary groups, the two or three different mercenary groups that Wagner's Bogosian, that, and there's the Patriot group, which is the general's own private army, and then there's one or two more private mercenary armies in companies in Russia owned by an oligarch or somebody, and that he was able to, and he created the elite units that were able to do it. But then all those elite units got slaughtered in the beginning of the Kiev attempt to grab Kiev. So he doesn't have anything. That's the problem. In other words, it's the projection of. In other words, Putin didn't want to spend money on, and the Russians. Once the Russians, so the Soviet Union spent 70-80% of the money on military. Okay, once the Soviet Union fell, what happened? Well, that money wasn't spent on the military. The budgets had to be spent on keeping the people happy, keeping the electorate happy. But then what the military budget was left was what? Well, we keep conscripts up, to keep bodies in there, but pay them shit, no money. And then what happens is everyone's stealing everything. The corruption is massive. So therefore, what happened for the time, all the spending that was happening there on his military, look now, it was mostly, all the good stuff was mostly for export. That the Russian army didn't get any of the nice new good toys, or didn't fly. And if they got the new toys, that the new planes or things, the pilots didn't train that much with them, because gas money, flying jets and in the air is going to consume money, and that money for the gas could be put in the pocket of some, general. Okay, can live in his dacha in Crimea or in Nestrevia, or off the Black one of that Black Republic on the Black Sea in Georgia. Wow, it's like meow, right? Meow. It's kind of happy, So he asked me a question here. Joshua asked me a question here. About where Putin go. I think Putin is vulnerable, but Putin was good at killing everyone. Putin just castrated all. There's no, this is something like Xi in China. He's removed any real competent threat to him at the high levels. So there's no real anyone that could simply challenge him, and that he's so. And Putin has created a lot of opposition groups, but they're controlled opposition that he creates and funds. So the question is, he could do this if the mass money, but the money's gone. The money's gone. This idea of the sanctions aren't hurting Russia. Bullshit. The Chinese and the Indians are buying Russian gas on the cheap, and the Indians fucked Russians by doing what? Only buying them in rupees, not dollars, rupees, and not allowing him to convert rupees into other currency at any rate. In other words, if he has to buy, he has to spend the rupees in India, and he doesn't need Indian clothes, Indian goods and services for this. He would like Indian technology, but he's forbidden to buy it. The Western technology bloc. India don't dare sell them any tech stuff, because the second they do that, they get hit with the sanctions. And the last thing India wants to do is lose access to the America or to the American and or European market. And the Chinese are kind of doing 2 foot, So Putin is good at because Boghossian is a clown. Everyone dislikes, and the other major guy who's in there, one of the Gazprom guys that are left. Everyone else would now maybe he could. I forget the guy's name. This is what's his name? The very famous Stephen Koshin. A very good historian, 2 books on Stalin, Russian historian. He's been doing videos on here. No, it's not Koshin. It's going to drive me crazy. I'll go get the book and get it here. Has Kotkin. He is at. I think he's you get these wonderful videos by him. He's a very good historian on Stalin, on Russian history and Russian Revolution, things like that. He wrote the 2-volume history of Stalin. It's going to be a 3rd volume soon. The post-war Stalin. Kotkin's right, I think, on this point that the guy who would be a threat to Putin, all the other oligarchs hate, and they would join up together to kill him. Okay, so Boghossian is just a thug and a buddy, but he's ironically made himself the truth teller. That's the weird thing about this. things, right? Boghossian's but the Telegram rants where he's doing he predicted many of the a lot of this of what's happening and why the events are flowing on Bakhmut the way they are. Now, of course, the infighting between the different military units and that. Okay, this is not going to help. I mean, that's why the army ain't helping Wagner. The Wagner ain't helping the Patriot Front. They don't coordinating. One side runs, the other side breaks. He begged the army. This recently, Boghossian goes on Telegram begging the para units not to stay and hold for 2 or 3 days, because this is the important thing. Now, what's happening? No, they're not. There's no communication. They're sabotaging each other. This is what the Ukrainians are getting better hitting. They're doing the targets. The Russians are desperately trying to keep Luhansk. So what? Moscow, I mean, that's different. A tactical stream, this idea they're going to make gains, that's not going to happen. In fact, their behavior, what they're doing right now is setting up, I mean, it's almost a perfect, Russia is doing everything Ukraine wants them to do. This is like the Wile E. Coyote doing all the stupid things the Roadrunner wants it to. This is like, this is the kind of clownish aspect of Putin's military regime that simply just created a problem. So there's not going to be any gains in Russia. It's the question of when and how soon will the Ukrainians recapture not only what was taken now, 2020, but what was grabbed in 2014. I can see Luhansk in the northern part of Luhansk, that'll be difficult. You'd have to have some kind of force into Russia, little northern Russia proper. And the Western nations won't allow Ukraine to send a Ukrainian army there. But they might allow sending where are the 100,000 missing POWs? They weren't all sent back. Most of the Russian soldiers do not want to go back when they surrender. They do not want, they fear being executed. Many of them have been told that by their families that they're dead. So what's going to happen with these prisoners of wars who are they going to go there? Or rumors, my Polish rumor network tells me that there's training grounds. There's a training ground someplace in Europe where these Russian soldiers are training. There's Belarusian volunteers and Georgian volunteers, huge Georgian volunteers, at least, and there's Chechen volunteers. Not only Chechen volunteers and someone like for the Russians, there's the other Chechens who hate the Chechen dictator volunteering that were fighting in Syria, who now are in Ukraine or even in the West training. The Belarusians, there's at least 100,000 Belarusian volunteers. This is even thing. So there's a weird thing going on that if they're able to produce Russian volunteers, what they might do is they might allow the Ukrainians might encourage a Russian force to go up there to conquer that, not just to take one of those northern cities right up in the Ukraine corner, cutting off the access. And it will not be Ukraine. Ukraine's own. It's not us. We're not doing it. There's this ethnic Russian volunteers. In other words, turn the Russian black men, what Putin did with the little gray men, flip it on them. I think that is what is in the goal book there. I think Crimea will be gone by December. I think once this counteroffensive does happen, and it's going to happen. Now, the Russians are doing everything to ensure victory. Them grabbing the counter. They moved 3 to 4 brigades who were there and blocking any southern move, moving it to reinforce Azov right now in Bakhmut, because they think this is going to collapse. And if that collapses, Luhansk and Donetsk collapses. You see that problem? If that collapses, all transport this way. That's the transport. Therefore, what's good is the land bridge. Okay, that's like the thing. What's good? They hold Crimea because what's good without Crimea? What's good is keeping Syria, the Syrian bases intact, because they can't project naval force or naval power into the Mediterranean without the Sebastopol. No Sebastopol, no Black Sea Fleet, no presence in the Mediterranean. And the danger. So I think there's a whole problem. The question is, won't he fall? It's going to be, when is someone going to take him out? That's why he's panicking. That's why he's doing everything he can. Putin's doing everything he can not to be around. Not to, the idea that he's. I'm not neoliberal. I'm not even neocon. This is just the reality of what's going on in that situation. That's why I don't think there's going to be. It's like, but the question is, who's going to take him out is going to be probably even worse than Putin. It ain't going to be a liberal. Okay, that's why sanctions aren't going to go away. We're going to have to. The best thing that happens to Russia is the loss of Russian power, but that creates a power vacuum in East Asia. The Eurasia area is going to be a big problem for many people from now on, because if Russia's a joke now. No one takes Russian serious. This is why all of a sudden, the whole story about the hypersonic missile. Well, the hypersonic missile seems to be a dud. Not because they were necessarily bad, is that maybe all of the selling points of hypersonic missiles is that, well, I hate to say it, that fast you can't be that maneuverable. If you're that fast with that speed, it's just physics. If you know the direction, the speed, you can hit it. We're not even with bullets. We're just simply lead being thrown at it. That Patriot systems were taking down hypersonic missiles scares the shit out of China. That means a GS can work against them. That therefore they spent all this money, all this time, and all this innovation on a system. This is maybe the best knowledge of American military right now, is that, we don't have to worry about hypersonic missiles aren't the real threat that everyone thinks they are. Ooh, you mean something as outdated as Patriot can knock it down? But then the argument is, it's the Russian version and they're bad and the Chinese better. Remember, the Chinese are stealing the Russian version. The Chinese are taking the Russian designs for everything still. The only change that is their new fighter plane, which they stole our F-35 planes. Oh. And even if you compare the Chinese version of their plane to our planes, the F-22, their fighter plane, which is not their F-23, F-22, they look at their famous new fifth generation fighter compared to the F-22. It's really no show. It's like the comparison of the MiG-25 to the F-15. It was twice the size, bulkier, slower, less fluid. I mean, that's the whole joke about this. So, sorry. I mean, I don't want geopolitics. I don't like talking about geopolitics because geopolitics is kind of But revolution, that's problematic because who's going to be the replacement? There's not going to be a liberal. There's no real groundwork for a moderate or liberal reformer. What Russia needs to do is Russia needs to become a normal nation. And how to do that? It has to lose the East. Therefore, there's going to be a power vacuum. Who's going to go for it? China's going to go for it. But Europe and America cannot allow China to have access of the Russian energy and mineral stuff and food. That will give China hegemony, give enough resources and things that they will not need trade, and that they can be the global aggressive power. So Europe will have to fight a war with China over Eurasia. And the big player that I'm going to say this, the big player I think will be a Eurasian actor will be Turkey. Many of the Eurasian states have the same ethnicities as the Turks do, the same religion as the Turks do. The Turks are already there in the region as construction companies and business firms, as much as the Russians. In fact, the Russians are more relying on Turkish companies to do the engineering there, because the Russians are not designed for companies. And the German companies, the German and the Russians work with the Turks in that part of the world, the Eurasian area. Turkey's move now. Does Erdogan survive the next round? I think so. I think Erdogan. I think Erdogan is playing a very complicated game. He sounds like he's pro-Russian, but he's doing that to fuck Russia, because he knows that his real this will be his third. His dreams of recreating the Ottoman Empire just is dead. The Arabs won't have it. Okay, the Arabs would rather get in bed with Iran. Many of the Arabs would rather get in bed with Iran than with Turkey. That's how hatred. Even though they hate the Persians as well, your Arab mind hates both Persia and the Turks in that sense. So, but Turkey will be the big winner in that region, Eurasia, because none of the Muslims want the Shia Islam to become powerful, because Persia and Shia. Oh my God, that'll freak everyone out in that area. They're destabilized, and that Iran is itself having a collapsing problem itself. They're politically collapsing, and in bed with Russia now. That's what this is even more funny. That the getting in bed in Russia comes at a time when both states are about to collapse. A kind of repeating of the history of World War I, the Ottoman Empire and the Russian Empire and the Austrian Empire. All these empires get there and they all collapse. So who gets the benefit in Russia? Putin will be in trouble. I think Putin is really in trouble, because Putin is in trouble because his age, who knows about his health. He might be fine, but so too many things. He's puffy. That's usually a bad sign. That means steroids, lots of steroids. He's taking lots of steroids, puffer. Lots of steroids do things to your heart and other valves. Parkinson's maybe, or some other. He shakes a lot. He's germphobe. He's very paranoid. No one could go near him. So all these things combined. Afraid of assassination by virus and things like this as well. So he's isolated, alone. I don't want to bring the Hitler analogy, because that's usually failure. But he's coming close to the man's bunker, right? And remember how Adolf takes it out, right? Is Vlad going to do the same thing? I don't think Vlad's going to do that, but I think what will happen is that will he use nukes? As Sam says, ask Evan. No, he's not going to use it. The subordinate officers will disobey that. Most of the Russian nukes will blow up on Russian soil. That's the reality. They haven't been. You think they spent? Just look how Russians maintain things. Spend a little time. If you spend any time in Russia, and look how they clean. Look how they maintain stuff. They do. And I'm sorry, nuclear weapons and rockets and this stuff. One of the reasons why their military equipment is breaking down is because they don't repair it. They didn't maintain it. All these tanks and equipment, where are they? They must have tens of thousands of tanks. Where are they? Because half of them are rotted. Half of them, their engine seized. Okay? That's because they didn't spend the money or the work effort maintaining stuff. So what happened? Do you think that's any different with their nukes? And if you don't fix and maintain nukes, they're more dangerous to you than to anyone else. That's why I think no one seriously takes Russian nuke threats seriously. This is why it's like, okay, keep on blowing hard in Vladimir. At one level they think, okay, he might use his tactical nukes that are stuck in Kaliningrad. Why do you think the Poles built an Aegis network system right in Kaliningrad, and put all the Patriot bases there? So the second he tries to launch an intermediate anywhere, it's going to come from Kaliningrad or Belarusia, and the whole Aegis network was already set. The land-based Aegis system network there. So that's neither here nor there. We're going to be at our hour or over the hour. I don't see any more questions. We have two people in the audience. And I went on a topic only because the person asked the question. I just talked about Vicky Nolan and that bullshit, because I always have problems with my people saying, oh, you're in favor of Ukraine, so therefore you're a neocon. You're neocon? Real? And the neocons aren't the neocons. The people, everyone throws the label neocon. It's really bad. And that's maybe a talk I should have. What are the neocons and who they really are versus who are we perceive them to be, and the difference between what we call conservative hawks and neocons. Conservative hawks have been around for since the 1950s and earlier. They're not neocons, but they kind of share. They're would be they do intersect at the level of neocons on level of projecting American power, but that's it. They're nothing similar. The Warhawks are kind of sour on democratization. They think democracy, who cares? As long as it doesn't matter if it's a good guy or a bad guy, as long as he's our guy, that what matters, right? That's the Warhawk. That's the old conservative Warhawks position. It doesn't matter if he's a Democrat or not Democrat. Is he our guy? That's even Jeane Kirkpatrick, the father, one of the leading neoconservative, Jeane Kirkpatrick, her Dictatorships and Double Standard essay in 1979, criticizing the Carter administration for undermining our friends in Latin America, okay, and undermining the Shaw, or democracy and human rights, okay. That was the kind of argument. Now, then there's the other kind. There's the I can never say is Joshua Menachla. He's a pretty good boy. He's a child of red diaper. He's typical of the neocons' grandchildren. His parents were communists and communist activists. He kind of rebelled against this like this. He got into the State Department. He was in the Defense and State Department with some about democracy promoting. He's a democracy, rah, 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 liberal democracy, rah, rah, rah crowd. Okay. That's another kind of neocon. So the neocons have multiple traditions and aspects of this. The Jeane Kirkpatricks of the world despised the Jeane Kirkpatrick wing of the neoconservatives, despised the democracy cheerleading wing of the neocons. So the neocons don't speak with one voice or there's one tradition. And even the Warhawks would agree with that Jeane Kirkpatrick wing on the projection of power. So that's another problem about this when we talk about these issues. There's kind of a oversimplification. Okay, I understand. This is Mr. Joe Sixpack watching his YouTube video. He's part of oh my God, patriotism now, rah rah, right? I'm as Tea Party as you can get, or MAGA as you can get. I'm right wing to right wing, okay? But I'm also not let's be realistic about these things, what is possible. Now, I get in trouble with my friends by saying when I think things are so shithole that you can't use compromise anymore. You just it's the shit has hit the fan, and you're gonna have to. It's you or them. Okay, it's you or them, and they're not gonna. The way the other side is acting, they're not gonna show any mercy or care or compassion towards people like me, people like anyone who disagrees with them. They're gonna just put us against the wall. They're gonna do to us like what the Germans did with the Jews. They're gonna do like what the Bolsheviks did to anyone that convicted the glorious progress of communism. Put you against the wall, shoot you, or send you to the camps. Right? This is what the wonderful progressive, whatever it is, what the wacky wokes will do. So my response to them, you treat them like rabid animals that they are, and you can't reason with a rabid animal. So you have to, force by force. But oh my God, don't you dare say that. That's horrible. Oh my God, you're not civilized. Well, yeah, if we were civilized and the law was working, and if the rules were working, and the procedures and all the things that were supposed to be there to kind of protect our system was doing its job, but they spent 30 years destroying everything. Taking over everything and using those institutions to destroy the system and putting their friends in power and creating people who are untouchable. What do you do? And that's a discussion. What to do with the untouchable in that sense. The English, that's why you study English history. Why? I mean, the founding fathers didn't like bills of attainder. What were bills of attainder? These were parliamentary, it's basically killing people. Oh, committed a crime against the king, well, you don't go to court. A trial would be risky because if you went to trial, it might be that you might get off. Okay, the judge and the jury might let you off, but you're too dangerous. You're above the law. The law won't affect you. You are too powerful. And the law, and you can basically get the right. You have the power and the ability to influence the judges, the juries, and everything else. And you're a threat to the system. Well, that's what the detainer was for. The detainer was to kill the powerful, the lords and the powerful stakeholders of power that the law could not deal with. Now, the founding fathers thought we would be a society all under law. Okay, we would have a system of law, and that no person would be above the law. But that's not true for the past 20 years. We know this. If no one was, just think of how many managers were sent to prison for doing the things Bill Clinton did to staffers, or lost their jobs, and then maybe even ended up going to jail for doing the things Bill Clinton did. And he gets off and forgiven. No, he doesn't face judgment. Hillary Clinton too. Things that Hillary Clinton and her family, and as she did. People, minor little nobodies, are going to jail and spending years in prison for being sloppy with their emails, with that secret emails. So if you're a small nobody who fucks up on an email, government security email, you go to jail. But if you're Hillary Clinton or the right people, you don't suffer the consequences. Okay, this is not equality under the law. This group is above the law, and you suckers better you just obey or die. Okay. Now I'll end my rant here on this because this is where I want to end on this. This is the dark side of the political theory, right? The rant is we get in our little live stream rant. Maybe I should have my rant at the beginning. I don't know. I'll get the rant at the end. I don't want to spend more than an hour on here. We're already 16 minutes, going to about 17, but I'm going to end it soon. So therefore, and we got 3 people in there, and no one said any more questions. So we're going to be at the end of the thing. So enough rant, enough things. That was a good time. I did my Friday. I kept my promise. I'll see you next Friday. Hopefully more people will come. We'll be there. Maybe some questions. People post some questions on this or things they want to talk about. We'll talk about it. So take care and have a good day. And see you again. And watch my posts on Mondays and Wednesdays for the Reading Montesquieu's Spirit of Laws. Take care. Bye-bye.